The train sighed and settled on the valley's edge. Clara stepped down. Dust climbed into her throat. Wind rattled a loose sign. She lifted her hat brim and searched for a man with a blue ribbon in his hat band. He had promised he would wear it. No blue ribbon. Only sunburnt faces and a boy leading a mule stacked with empty barrels. The station agent slid his window open. "Miss Clara Whitlow? I am Clara Carter now." She passed a folded paper through the slot. It was signed in advance. He said to file it when I arrived. The agent read, "Ma'am, Samuel Pike rode out last night to fetch you. A flash flood came down Dry Willow Draw. They found his hat at dawn. They found him at noon. The floor tipped." Clara's fingers bit the handle of her bag. She saw his neat letters in the last note. Steady, hopeful, simple. "Where is he?" she asked. "Up the ridge. Cemetery by the cottonwoods." He slid the paper back to her. "I'm sorry. Water means this year." A tall man in a sweat-dark hat looked her way. A girl of 8 stood with him, chin lifted, eyes bright as flint. She held a slate, held tight. Clara steadied her voice. "Can I hire a rig to the ridge?" "You can," the agent said. "Mind the draws? They sleep and then they bite." The rig rattled over stones. Dust gathered on Clara's tongue. As they climbed, the land opened into hard miles of faded grass and grayer soil. Dry ditches lay like empty veins. A wooden headgate straddled a creek bed. Its plank showed fresh cuts, blade marks left from night work. They passed a windmill, hunting for a breath that was not there. Below it, the earth wore a white crust. Further on, one set of fences stood straight while others sagged. At the top, the cemetery waited without ornament. Stones. Names. The tall man removed his hat. Beside him, the girl watched with careful stillness. Clara found Samuel Pike's name on a rough board. Dates cut short. She did not cry. The ground would not drink tears. She laid her hand on the board to feel the truth. A splinter pressed into her palm. "I came," she said softly. "I kept my word." When she turned, the tall man and the girl stood a few paces off. "Elias Carter," he said. "This is my daughter, Ruth." "Clara," she said. "I was promised." Ruth tipped the slate. She had drawn a spring, a gate, and 2 horses at night. Brands marked their shoulders. "I saw men," Ruth said. "They cut the gate." "Not from our place," Elias's jaw worked. "You sure?" Ruth pointed to a star with a nick in its right point. "I know that brand," she said. "Mr. Crane's foreman rides it." Clara looked from the slate to the wounded gate, to high clouds that would not open. Pieces moved inside her like gears catching. Water had taken the man she was to marry. Water, miscounted and misused, would take this valley if allowed. Elias studied her. "You have a place to stay?" "I meant to go to Mr. Pike's homestead," she said. "A door, a table, a field to learn?" "There's a door at my place," Elias said, shaping each word. "It stays open to decent folks needing shade." Clara's ache eased at the plain mercy of it. "Thank you. Best come down before the weather turns," he said. "These draws bite when folks forget them." They started back as evening lay gold on the land. Cottonwood leaves whispered. Ruth rode close to the rig, slate in her lap, watching the headgate when the road bent toward it. The planks wore a dark chew where a blade had worked. At the dry crossing, the team jolted. Clara's bag slid. A book slipped free and landed in her lap. A seed ledger taken from Samuel's trunk at the station. Something he had meant to show her. Pages fluttered. Tidy entries, then odd marks in the margins. Crosses and circles and letters that did not match the seed's names. She caught the ledger and sensed order beneath the clutter. Hope pressed thin as paper, but it pressed. Somewhere under this hard land, something still moved. Someone meant to keep it for himself. Ruth drew quick lines and held up the slate. A windmill, a pipe, arrows bending down and up. The girl's mouth barely moved. "Maybe water hides," she said. "Maybe it still talks, just quiet." "Maybe," Clara said. She let the words settle like a seed. The rig rolled toward a house she had not expected and a name she had only spoken. Behind them, the cut gate waited. Ahead, the ledger lay warm against her side, patient as a key in a pocket. Smoke from Elias's cook stove drifted above the yard. Chickens pecked at the steps. The house was plain and clean. Swept porch, patched bench, a rope for the bell. Clara felt travel settle in her bones, dust in her throat. "Wash up," Elias said, nodding at a tin basin. He said it like an offer. Ruth ran ahead, filled it, and set a small bar of yellow soap. Inside, the kitchen smelled of beans and cornbread. Jars lined the shelf, beets, peaches, and 3 of honey. The table had a burn scar, a dark circle. Clara set Samuel's seed ledger on the sideboard. The book seemed to hum. She tied back her hair and took the chair Elias pulled out. They ate in a quiet place. Ruth drew a quick rose in steam on her cup, then wiped it. Elias ate like a man who worked steadily. A knock came, not shy. Elias opened the door. A deputy stepped in, boots dusted to the knee. Behind him stood a man in a saddle-ruined suit. "Evening," the deputy said. "Judge Ellery sends a note." The suited man tipped his hat 2 inches. "Crane Valley Water Company. We own the headworks. Paying respects to Miss Whitlow." His eyes counted Clara's dress, the ledger, the empty ring finger, and put each in a box. Clara rose. "Miss Whitlow will do," she said. Elias broke the seal, read, and the paper shook once. He set it down. "Judge says there's to be a hearing. Some claim I keep a house without a mother. Unless I show a proper household by month's end, Ruth goes to town." Ruth went still. Her cup clicked on the table. Crane set a pamphlet down. Valley Water Company in thick letters. "Hard news. Children need settled homes. Water needs settled hands. The Pike homestead is unclaimed now. Land without a legal keeper confuses. We would be happy to hold the title for the public good." "The spring isn't your public," Elias said. He didn't raise his voice. The room grew quieter anyway. The deputy cleared his throat. "Elias, the judge notes a school in the home might count toward a proper household." He underlined stable family structure. Clara felt the note's weight. She saw Ruth grip her slate like a ledge. She thought of the ledger's odd marks, the cut headgate, the brand with the nicked star. Crane kept his smile soft. "Miss Whitlow, you came to marry and found grief. We can arrange travel east at the company's expense. No reason to tangle yourself in valley troubles." "Thank you," Clara said, and let the words go. After they left, the room held their absence like smoke. Elias cleaned bowls already clean. Ruth stood by her slate as if waiting for a word that would fix things. Clara turned the judge's paper and read it slowly. The deadline cut like a thin knife. "What will you do?" she asked. Elias dried his hands and looked at Ruth. "Whatever keeps her home," he said. "Even if it cuts pride. Pride doesn't milk a cow. Pride doesn't tuck a girl in at night." Ruth lifted her chin. "I can help. I can be extra good." "You're already enough," he said. Wind spoke in the stovepipe. A dry leaf scraped the porch. Clara opened the ledger to the strange marks. Boxes, circles, letters that did not match. The boxes ran 1, 2, 3, then a circle, then again. A pattern, maybe a map, maybe a code to a buried pipe. A struck match thought. If the Pike place stayed legally open with her name on paper, Crane could not seize it. If a school ran there at dawn, the old covenant might pull the spring back to the people, but the law would not count a lone woman as a household. The judge said so. She folded her hands to stop their tremble. She had crossed miles to keep a promise. She could cross this shorter distance too if the other person moved toward her. Elias watched, seeing gears turn. He picked up his hat, set it down, and picked it up again. "Mr. Carter," she said, steady. "You need a proper household on paper. The valley needs the Pike place held by someone who won't sell the spring. I need a place to do the work I came to do." His eyes found hers. "Say your thought plain. A marriage," she said. "In name for a time. Your name for my standing. We set rules we agree on. We keep the spring safe. We keep Ruth home." Silence filled the kitchen. The stove ticked as a coal settled. Ruth held her breath. Elias's hand closed on a chair back. "I won't make a bargain that harms you," he said at last. "But I will listen." Clara nodded once. Then let us speak terms. They spoke terms at the kitchen table with the seed ledger between them like a small steady fire. Clara kept her hands folded to stop their shake. Elias set his hat crown down, brim making a ring on the wood. Plain rules, Clara said. Honesty without sharp edges. Work shared, accounts written clearly. I keep my savings, you keep your ranch books. Decisions that touch Ruth we make together. Elias nodded. I don't drink more than a swallow on Sundays. I won't start. I won't raise a hand in anger. I won't barter Ruth's safety for any favor. Clara breathed easier. Separate rooms. No pretending feelings we have not chosen. Kind speech before the girl. Ruth hugged her slate. Her eyes were bright and quiet. And the spring? We protect it, Clara said. On paper, in practice. Elias slid his thumb along the ledger's edge. The judge will ask why so fast. Because paper cuts slow when we wait, she said, and Crane swings a larger knife. Outside, the pump creaked and fell still. Elias opened a drawer and set 2 plain bands on the table. They were not new. One held a shallow nick. I kept these, he said, from before. His voice thinned. They stayed until Ruth outgrew baby shoes. Clara touched the nicked band. If we do this, we do it clean. We say what it is. Clean, Elias said. They drove to the parsonage before the light failed. Dogs thumped tails on the porch. The parson's wife brought water and a printed form. Ink smelled sharp and honest. A vase held 2 roses, one fallen petal like a red comma. The person read their names. By this paper and your word, you take on duties of care and provision. Clara signed, Clara Whitlow Carter, pressing the nib to stop a blot. Elias signed with slow strength. Ruth made the witness mark, tongue between teeth. Do you want vows? The parson asked. We want words that mean what they say, Elias said. So the person used small words and a quiet voice. Elias's hand did not touch Clara's. Still, his shoulders eased when the parson said, Let no one use this union for their profit. Ruth let out a breath like a laugh caught too long. Outside, the sky wore a copper lid. A dust devil crossed an empty field and lay down. The ring felt strange on Clara's finger, not heavy, not light. A tool, not a jewel. A key, not a crown. Back at the house, Clara took the ledger to the lamp. The margins held their forest of marks. She copied 1 page onto scrap, each box and circle like fence posts. The pattern broke near a seed word. Letters that should have been simple had shifted. Every 3rd vowel turned into another. She tested the alphabet against it like teeth on a hull and heard the soft crack of sense. The odd word was not vetch, but vain. Elias came in with the smell of stock and dusk. He set his gloves by the stove, not near the flame, just so. Ruth's down, he said. She asked if school could be in the barn. Clara tapped the margin. Every 4th entry is not a seed. It's a turn or a point. If we follow them, we reach a buried box. The ledger hides a map to a water vein. You certain? Certain enough to look, she said. At dawn. Quiet as roots. They drew a map on butcher paper. Ruth padded out, barefoot, half asleep. She watched, then took a charcoal stub and sketched the nicked star brand, a warning. She added a small bell by the Pike homestead and circled it. If the bell rings, spring returns, she whispered. Clara touched her hair. Sleep. When the house quieted, Clara made her bed in the spare room. The sheets smelled of soap and sun. She set the ring on the washstand and turned the ledger page. Each mark felt like a stitch through time, pulling her toward the alkali crust where water still spoke in a low voice. In the next room, Elias's boots thumped softly. He paused at the doorway, not crossing it. "I'll drive," he said, before first light. "Thank you," she said. He hesitated. "I won't fail a promise twice," he said, almost too low to catch. He touched the doorframe like a gate he had rebuilt, then left. Clara lay listening. Coyotes traded news far off. The windmill sought wind and found a thin thread. Under the earth she pictured hidden water, patient as a held breath, waiting for the right cut to speak. She slid the ledger under her pillow, as if the valley might talk in her sleep and tell her where to place the first spade. She finally closed her eyes. They left before dawn, the sky iron gray, the chickens still dreaming. Elias drove with quiet hands. Ruth rode in the back with rope, a small spade, and her slate. Clara kept the seed ledger open on her knees. They passed the head gate, its fresh knife scars pale. The creek bed held nothing but the memory of sound. At the Pike homestead, frost silvered the pump handle. The cabin door stuck, then gave. Dust lay on the table. In the corner stood a small school bell, the clapper tied with twine. Clara traced the first turns. 20 paces from the corner of the house, she said, then south to the mulberry, then west to the stone with a cross. Elias measured with his stride. Ruth followed, counting. They found the mulberry, half dead but stubborn. They found a stone with a chiseled X, half buried like a tooth. Under Clara's feet the ground changed from tight to hollow. She pushed the spade into the crust. It cracked and flaked. Beneath it came powder, then dampness. Elias widened the cut with his hands. Ruth held the rope and did not speak. A board showed under the powder. Weathered oak, tar at the seams. 2 iron rings weighted like eyes. Elias tested them. "Stuck," he said. "Tar will let go if we warm it," Clara said. She held a match near the seam. Elias pried again. The board lifted a thumb's width, then a hand's. Cold air rose. Ruth crouched with her slate. "Is it a box?" she asked. "It is a gate," Clara said, "but a different kind." Under the board lay a lid with a notch like a half moon. The ledger's marks matched it. Elias threaded the rope through the ring and braced his boots. Clara counted. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. They pulled together. The lid rose heavy until a dark square opened at their feet. Not water, a chamber, brick sides. A clay pipe entered from the east and another left to the west. The space hummed with a low sound, more felt than heard. Clara put her palm over the east pipe. Air moved there faintly. "There is flow," she said. "Hidden." Elias tied the lid open to a post. He looked at her. "What do you need?" "A clear hose," she said. "And your windmill." They worked in a plain rhythm. Elias set a small barrel below the mill. Ruth fetched a coil of hose and a tin pail and drew a diagram on her slate. Clara primed the hose, sucking until cold kissed her tongue. She sealed the top and lowered it into the pipe's mouth. The hose trembled. A bubble coughed, then another. The barrel's rim darkened. A thin line drew itself across tin, then widened. Elias watched the level rise, a quiet softening in his face. "It still moves," he said. "It still moves," Clara echoed. "We must get it past the crust. If it meets air, it gives up." She packed clay around the hose to keep a seal. Ruth stood guard with the bell rope in her hand. Time stretched. The barrel is filled to the 3rd ring. Elias tipped it into the west channel, where a ditch had once run true. For a beat, the trickle vanished into white crust. Then, 10 yards down, a tiny dark appeared. then a glisten, then a finger-wide thread that kept going. Ruth rang the bell once. A bright sound. "It talks," she said. "It talks," Clara said, "but it needs protection. If Crane sees this, he will bury it deeper. We must make the flow public. We must use the law." "Dawn school," Elias said. "If the covenant breathes, we buy time." They closed the lid and brushed their tracks with sage. As they finished, a rider moved along the ridge, one man, then two. They slowed near the head gate and sat their horses like spiders on silk. The nicked star brand caught the light. Ruth drew small. Elias stepped in front of her. The riders watched a while, then eased along. "Night work," Clara said. "They'll be back." "Then we won't sleep," Elias said. They took the bell to the barn. Clara scrubbed the clapper and tied on new twine. She hung a slate near the door and wrote, "School, reading, sums, weather, dawn." Ruth traced the strokes. "Tomorrow," Clara said, "we ring the bell before the sun. We invite anyone within earshot. We teach with what we have. We keep a register." "And the judge will have to see it," Elias said. "We will write in water," she said, "and in names." Night leaned over the homestead. Elias checked the barn doors. Clara listened to the hum below the crust. It sounded like a stubborn truth saying, "Keep going, keep going." Ruth slept easily, slate under pillow tonight. The bell rang while the sky was the color of cold iron. Sound jumped from barn to cottonwood to ridge. Elias set a lamp by the door. Ruth straightened the slate. Clara checked the ledger, the hose, and the barrel under the windmill. "School begins," she said. Neighbors came because the bell asked and the drought asked louder. Mrs. Torres with flour on her cheek. Mr. Hahn with his pipe, unlit. Two cowboys from the West place. A woman with a baby at her shoulder. They stood shy until Ruth gave each a chalk nub. Clara wrote names in a clean column. "We will read and do sums," she said. "And a little weather. The valley needs better counting." Elias poured coffee, stretched with chicory, and stood by the door, half guard, half host. They practiced short words. Ruth passed a primer with roses on the cover. Alma traced the picture like a promise. Outside, the windmill creaked in a hopeful rhythm. The low hum under the crust seemed to answer. Between reading and sums, Clara lifted the hose. "A lesson in flow," she said. "There is water under us that does not show because the surface is hard and white. If we help it travel without swallowing air, it will come back to light." She led them to the buried box. She did not show the ledger, only the steps. Elias and the cowboys pried the lid and tied it open. Cold air rose and a faint sound. Clara primed the hose and lowered it into the east pipe's mouth. "We do not have to cut," she said. "We have to listen." She sealed it with clay. The barrel filled by degrees, quiet, steady. She tipped it into the west run. They watched the white crust drink and then stubbornly yield. 10 steps down, a dark line appeared. It thickened to a thread, then a ribbon no wider than a hand. Mrs. Torres cried once softly. Mr. Hahn took his pipe from his mouth. The baby hiccuped and slept more deeply. Elias looked younger. "It still moves," he said. Clara nodded. "This tells us what is true even when men with knives say otherwise. The spring is not dead. It is held." They worked for an hour. Phil tip watch. Neighbors took turns at the barrel and the hose. Ruth rang the bell each time the ribbon reached a new stone. Elias kept a register. Names, day, purpose, school held, water study, witnesses present. A rider came slowly along the fence and stopped. He wore the nicked star on his shoulder. "Morning," he said. "The company says this ground is unstable. Keep away from the headworks until surveyors arrive." "This is a lesson," Clara said. "You're welcome to learn." "I read just fine," he said. His gaze touched each face, then found Ruth. Elias did not raise his voice. "You've been told what this is," he said. "Go ride." The man's smile thinned. Hate to see folks get hurt over a trickle, he said. Brands cut deep. He turned and rode off. Neighbors stood still until his shape slid off the ridge, then breathed. Clara lifted the primer again. Back to reading, she said. Short words, strong words, water, bread, home. When the sun cleared the rim, school ended. Clara closed the register and shook each hand. She sent Alma with a small jar drawn from the ribbon, corked tight. Pour it on your garden corner, she said. When the yard was quiet, Clara and Elias walked the ditch line, marking where the ribbon widened and where it sank. She set stakes with strips of red cloth from an old petticoat. The breeze lifted the flags. We can move more with a proper siphon, she said. A larger barrel and a second hose. Elias nodded. We'll build a trough from scrap. Ruth followed with her slate hugged to her chest. She had drawn the nicked star in the set of a man's jaw. I saw him last night, she said. His name? Clara asked. Lyle, she whispered. They hid the hose and covered the lid with a brush. Clara washed her hands in a dipper and watched gray water fan across dust and vanish. Hope is not a flood, she said. It will have to do until we make more. Elias said. They ate bread and beans. Ruth fell asleep over her slate. Clara carried her to bed and set the slate beside the pillow. In the quiet after, Clara opened the ledger and traced the next marks. Her finger stopped over a small cross near the head gate. The margin note was one word, listen. Under the dust and the iron talk, the valley spoke again, keep going. She breathed once, steadied her hands, and planned the next dawn's work with careful, stubborn hope inside. Ruth woke before the bell, eyes wide as daybreak. She brought her slate to the table and set it like a witness. On it she had drawn 2 men at the head gate, the moon a thin coin. The nicked star brand rode the nearer shoulder. The second man wore a hat with a curled brim and a tear on the left side. Clara poured coffee and watched the lines. The drawing was clean and true. You remember clearly, she said. Ruth touched the curl. He laughed without sound. She whispered. Elias came in from the yard, hands black from stove wood. He studied the slate, mouth tight. He set 2 jars on the table, one with screws, one with nails, and chose the heavier. We'll take this to town, he said. The deputy can put a name to it. Clara packed the register, the seed ledger, a bread heel, and the small jar Alma had returned. The road to town ran hard. Dust lifted and hung. They stopped at the head gate first. Knife scars had multiplied. A fresh boot track showed where a heel had slipped. Clara bent close. A nail lay in the silt. She pried it free and wrapped it in cloth. At the depot, the deputy met them with a paper smile. Busy morning, he said. Clara set the slate on his desk. Ruth saw these men at the gate, she said. We ask that names be written under faces. The deputy squinted, then nodded once. Lyle Harker for the star. Foreman to Mr. Crane, the hat with the curl, Jed Bliss. Elias's hand closed and opened. You going to write them up? He asked. I can ask questions, the deputy said. Hard to arrest a drawing? Clara set the wrapped nail on the desk. From the cut, she said. Tar on the threads, the deputy weighed it. I'll bag it, he said. I'll ask. Crane entered as if the door were his. He wore a fresh suit. Dust could not humble him. Morning, he said. He looked at the slate, then at Ruth. Children draw monsters where there are none. Ruth lifted her chin. Monsters cut in the dark, she said. Clara stood between them, not loud, simply there. We will ring the school bell each dawn, she said. You may send your men to learn letters. Crane's eyes cooled. Judge Ellery will sort this, he said. Paper and law, not chalk and stories. He touched 2 fingers to his brim and left. On the way home, they found 3 fence wires snipped. Hoof marks pressed a path toward the herd. Elias set the new wire, jaw working. Clara held the post while he twisted. This is Crane's answer, he said. Little cuts. Then we will answer with little stitches, she said. Back at the homestead, someone had shoved an unsigned notice under the door. Trespassers will be fined. Elias pinned it to the barn wall and drove a second nail through it. Clara set about the siphon with care. She checked seals, washed the hose, and counted rings on the barrel. She spoke low to Ruth about air and flow. "We guide water like a shy animal," she said. "No sudden moves." By noon, the ribbon reached the next flag of red cloth. Bees found the wet edge and drank. The sight put steadiness back in Clara's chest. A shout rose from the ridge. One of the West cowboys waved his hat. "Smoke," he called. They ran to the south field. Someone had set tumbleweed alight and shoved it against dry grass. Elias kicked with his boots, beat with his coat, and stamped until sparks died. The fire had bitten a dark half-moon before it starved. At the ash's edge lay a heel mark with a small cut in the sole, 2 notches like a forked snake. Clara pressed it with her palm to fix it in her mind. Ruth drew a rose in the ash, then blew and watched it vanish. "Fire talks too," she said. They did not ring the bell that evening, but Clara kept teaching Elias how to tie the hose faster. Ruth how to copy the register neatly. The valley how to hold a thin stream without losing heart. When the sky went copper, a rider stood at the far fence. The windmill found a thread of air and turned. After supper, Clara unfolded the ledger and traced the next cross near the head gate. The margin said, "Wait." She closed the book and listened. The house held a quiet you could trust. Elias sanded a stair tread. Ruth slept with her slate. Clara blew out the lamp and let the dark settle. She laid the ledger on her chest. The valley spoke in that low hum again. "Keep going." She answered, I will for us." Night lay flat over the valley. The windmill clicked. Elias checked the cinch on his bay and set 2 lanterns on the rail. Clara tied her hair in a kerchief. Ruth held the bell rope. "We keep watch," Elias said. "If riders come, ring and go to the cellar. 2 pulls for the herd. 3 for gate," Ruth said. Clara clipped the seed ledger to her belt. "If they cut again, I want the marks." Cricket started and stopped. The wind brought a sour coal oil scent. Elias swung into the saddle. "Headgate." Clara grabbed a lantern and ran the fence line. Ruth stayed by the bell. 2 shadows worked at the gate. One levered a pry bar. One poured oil on the hinge. "Enough," Elias said. They turned. The nicked star brand flashed. Jed Bliss's hat curled like a grin. "Evening lesson," he said. "Company says the gate stays shut." "The spring says otherwise," Clara said, setting the lantern so her hands were free. Oil slid black. Lyle heaved. The hinge screamed. Elias grabbed the iron. Bliss lunged for the light. It blew out. Dark swallowed them. From the south pasture, hooves thundered. The herd ran, spooked by noise and stink, pounding toward Dry Willow Draw. "Ruth!" Elias shouted. "Bell!" 2 bright pulls answered. Neighbors would hear. But the herd was already a blind river. Elias glanced from gate to herd and chose. "I'll turn them," he said, and drove the bay into the dust. Clara struck a match and lit the second lantern. The hinge pin was lifting. If it jumped, the gate would jam shut. She wedged the tarred nail above the pin. It shuddered and held. Lyle cursed and wrenched again. Bliss swung to knock the lantern away. Clara stepped back, hit a post, and kept the flame up, though heat licked her knuckles. Ruth rang again. 3 pulls now. Shapes came from the ridge. Mr. Hahn, Mrs. Torres's boy, 2 cowboys with ropes, and a wet sack. "Light there," Mr. Hahn said. He slapped the sack on the oily hinge. It spat and smoked. The cowboys threw light loops to tangle Lyle's reach. Bliss fired a wild shot and backed away. "Go," Clara said, voice even. Bliss laughed without sound. "Cows break their necks in the dark. Water goes where we tell it." They wheeled and rode. Clara handed the lantern to Ruth. "Stay behind me." "We go to the herd." They ran. Dust skinned their throats. Elias's voice rose like a low rope, tugging the lead cow aside. The herd poured toward the drop anyway. Clara climbed the fence lantern high and found a shallow wash feeding the draw. She tore a strip from her skirt and tied it to a willow. "Here!" she shouted. Safe footing. Elias saw and pressed the lever that way. A neighbor flanked and swung a jacket. The herd hesitated, then swung, then almost swung back. For a breath, it felt like all would go over. "Ruth, Belle," Clara yelled. 2 pulls cut the night again. The cows checked. Elias pushed once more. Hooves flooded into the shallower wash. Stones held. A calf fell, rose, and stumbled on. The ground trembled less. The tail came, steam ribboning in the cold. Elias slid from the bay and straightened, looking for Clara. He lifted his hand. "Are you hurt?" She showed her palm, blistered but steady. He nodded once. Neighbors drifted in, coughing dust. Ruth pressed against Clara's side. "I kept the counts," she said. 2, then 3. "You saved time," Clara said. Back at the gate, Mr. Hahn had driven a spike through the hinge and wired it tight. The wet sack cooled the oil. The gate held for now. "This won't last," Elias said. "It only has to last until morning," Clara said. "Daylight is witness. Paper is shelter. We make the school formal. Every dawn the register is posted. Copies to parson, deputy, judge. We'll add a note about the raid," Mr. Hahn said. "And we keep the siphon alive," Clara said. "We teach by it, we guard it." The east lifted from black to ash. Birds tried single notes. The windmill found a longer breath. They walked home in a tired line. Ruth carried the bell rope like a tame snake. Clara held the ledger tight, warm from work that had chosen her back. In the yard, Elias stopped. "Thank you," he said. "For the herd." "For Ruth." "We are not alone," Clara said. He looked at her hand, red and blistered, and wrapped it with a wet cloth. "Not neat. Dawn soon," he said. "Ring the bell," she answered, and Ruth Fierce did. The bell's sound rode the pale light across the fields. Far off, a rider paused and turned away. Clara and Elias shared a look like a promise. Stand, teach, hold, and endure. Now. Dawn opened like a pale lid. The bell called, clear and brave. Clara laid the register on the barn table, chalked the day in neat strokes, and set cups on a crate. Neighbors came with the light. More than yesterday. Mrs. Torres brought 2 boys. Mr. Hahn has a rain gauge cut from a bottle. Alma with the baby. They signed their names or made their marks. Elias stood at the door, hat off, a wall you could pass through if you were decent. "School begins," Clara said, reading first, then sums, then the weather. Then a water lesson. She passed out pages torn from old ledgers, blank sides cleaned with sand. She wrote short words on the slate: bread, rope, gate, home. The barn held their voices like a hand holds water, carefully so none spilled. Between words, she stepped out to the siphon. The hose still drank in the dark, and the barrel gave it back to the shallow trench where the white crust had begun to soften. The sound under the earth, low, steady, told her to keep pace, not rush. Ruth rang a small bell at each change of subject. Elias pinned the register by the door for any traveler to see and made 2 copies, one for the parson, one for the deputy. A wagon rattled in. Deputy Cole climbed down. "Here to witness," he said. Judge Ellery asked for proof. Clara placed the register before him. "You may watch the lesson," she said. "And help." He read with the children. When they reached sums, he counted in time with the windmill's turns. Crane arrived near noon, not alone. 2 surveyors followed him. He stopped at the wet ribbon and frowned. "This is improper use," he said. "You alter headworks without a permit and gather people without a license." Clara stood in the doorway where the shade cut the glare. "We are holding school," she said. "The law of 1869 says if a school operates on the homestead, the spring's flow becomes a public easement until the drought passes. Mr. Pike's deed bears that covenant." She lifted a folded paper from the ledger's pocket, a rubbing she had made last night from the deed's worn page. The words were faint but legible. She had inked them clean. Crane's smile cooled. "A rubbing is not a deed." "The deed will come to the hearing," Clara said. "Today you are welcome to learn." One surveyor peered at the ribbon. "That's movement," he muttered. Crane shot him a look. "We'll return with orders," he said, and left dust where thanks should have been. They kept teaching. Ruth read a verse about water that does not fail. Alma copied her name 3 times and held the page like a coin. Mr. Hahn set his rain gauge on a post and wrote 0 with a small line of hope beside it. When classes ended, Clara, Elias, and Ruth carried extra registers to town. They tacked one to the church door, one to the depot window. The parson added his neat signature below the list of names. "A school is a promise," he said. "I have heard the bell." On the way back, they stopped at the cemetery. Clara knelt by Samuel Pike's board. "We are using what you left," she said. "Ledger, map, covenant. It is holding." The afternoon wore thin. Elias fixed a leak in the trough. Ruth counted cows. Clara opened the ledger and traced the next odd word. She felt the crack of sense, near the head gate. Something more than a map waited. Some mark of the law hidden where men would not look. She ran a finger along the ledger's spine and felt an uneven place under the leather, like a bead under cloth. She did not pry yet. Waiting had saved them more than once. She wrote in the margin, "Hold fast." Near sundown, a family from the North Ridge arrived with biscuits. "My mother taught me in Kansas," the woman said. "I can take a day a week." Her husband nodded. "I'll ride the head gate at night with Hahn." Clara felt the day add muscle. "Thank you," she said. "Put your names in the book." They ate outdoors. The wind smelled of dust and sage. Elias passed the jar of honey. Ruth fell asleep in Clara's lap, chalk dust like snow on her fingers. Stars came early. From the ridge a single rider watched and then turned away. The windmill ticked. The ribbon shone a narrow path of dark through the pale earth. "Tomorrow we teach again," Clara said. "Tomorrow," Elias answered, as if the word were a fence post set deep. The valley's low hum answered them both. "Keep going, keep going." The day had written one more line in the ledger of proof. Soon Clara meant to bring the whole book to daylight. At gray dawn they rode to town. Clara carried the school register and the seed ledger wrapped in cloth. Elias kept the bay steady. Ruth held her slate and a jar of water drawn from the hidden vein. The courthouse was filled with hats. Judge Ellery sat high. Crane took a front bench with Lyle Harker and Jed Bliss. The judge tapped his pencil. "We are here for custody and for water." He nodded at Ruth. "Child, take the window seat." Crane spoke first. "Valley Water Company owns the headworks. The Pike homestead is in default. Access is restricted. Private parties are disrupting operations with stories." Clara rose. "We hold a dawn school on the Pike place," she said. "Here is the register signed by neighbors, the parson, and the deputy. Mr. Pike's deed carries a covenant. While a school operates, the springs flow as a public easement. Do you have the deed?" The judge asked. "Mr. Pike hid the notary seal in his seed ledger when the deed began to wear," Clara said. She eased the inner leather and lifted a small round wax and pressed paper, original seal. "Dates match the church copy." The parson stepped forward. "I attest the copy," he said. Crane's smile cooled. "A seal does not bind the present. Our maps show the spring failed." Deputy Cole raised a page. "Those maps drop a ridge and twist the scale," he said. "Here is a tarred nail from the hinge. Here is a heel rubbing with a forked notch that matches Jed Bliss's shoe." Clara lifted Ruth's slate. "This drawing was made before dawn," she said. "2 riders at the gate. The nicked star brand. The curled brim." Judge Ellery took his time. "Mr. Crane, you may answer for forgery if proof holds," he said. "On custody, Mr. Carter married in good faith. The school shows care. Absent harm, the child stays with her father. In the spring, until a daylight survey, the Pike flow is held as a public easement under the covenant. No one cuts the headworks without order. We will walk the site this afternoon." Crane's jaw set. "That ground is unsafe." "Then be careful," the judge said. "You did it," Elias said as they stepped outside. "We did it," Clara said. "They will still test us." On the way, they gathered neighbors. Mr. Hahn brought a rope. Mrs. Torres wet sacks. The parson has his pen. At the head gate, they smelled oil. The spike Mr. Hahn had driven was bent. Judge Ellery arrived with the deputy and clerks. Crane came with riders and a look that said paper meant nothing. "Stand back," Crane told his men. "Company work." "No," the judge said. "Court walk, we look. No one cuts." They crowded the ditch. Elias kept one hand on Ruth's shoulder and the other near the rope. Clara set the ledger open to the margin that read, "Listen." A shot snapped from the ridge. Bliss whooped and drove his horse at the hinge. Lyle heaved the iron. The pin lifted. The gate began to fall. Clara moved. She jammed the tarred nail into the hole. Pain burned. The pin checked. Elias looped the rope and hauled. Mr. Hahn braced. Neighbors dug in. Ruth rang the bell without counting. "End this," Crane said. "End it by witness," Clara said, voice even. "Judge, do you see? We can hold it. Let us open the old box in daylight." The judge looked at her red hand and the trembling pin. "Show me now," he said. They ran to the buried lid. Elias pried. Cold air rose from the brick chamber. The east pipe breathed faintly. Clara primed the hose, sealed it with clay, and set the barrel. The windmill turned slowly, then steadier. Drops grew to a thread, then to a ribbon the width of a hand. They led the judge along the trench. The white crust darkened where the ribbon passed. The person wrote the hour. Neighbors stood still. "This is not magic," Clara said. "It is pressure and patience. The spring still moves. The crust hides it. The covenant applies," the judge said. "Any man who cuts now will answer to the court." From the ridge, riders gathered again. Elias looked at Clara. She looked back. Both knew this was not done. The law had spoken. But men who used knives at night would try in the sun. "Hold the rope," Elias told Ruth. "If they break, ring hard." Clara tucked the seal safe. "We stay at the gate," she said. "We stand until the light leaves it." They took their places by hinge and post. The ribbon kept speaking down the ditch, "Here, here, here." The riders on the ridge, seeing the court and the bell rope gathered, chose to wait for a hotter hour. The standoff began. Now, the heat rose as the sun climbed. Dust stung. The judge stood at the post with his pencil. Crane watched the wet ribbon with a face that would not bend. Elias stood by the hinge with rope burns bright on his palms. He looked at Ruth and Clara. He lifted his brand iron from the saddle roll. "My word is my bond," he said. "If word is not enough, take a mark. I stake my brand as a pledge for this flow. If it fails by our doing, claim my herd and land." The judge bowed once. "Let the pledge be written," he said. Clara set her hand a breath from his, not touching close as trust. Crane smiled thinly. "Fine theater," he said. "Water is a company matter. We open or shut as charts demand." "Not today," the judge said. "Today the people look." Riders slid down the slope and lined the bank, hands near guns. "Hold," Elias said mildly. Clara went to the buried lid. The hose still drank, but the pipe could carry more if the chamber were cleared. Mr. Pike's margin said, "When safe, open both. If we open the second throat, the valley will see truth," she said. "Loud is fine," Elias said. "I'll stand the gate." Ruth gripped the bell rope. "Ready," she said. Clara slid the bar under the inner stone. Brick rasped. The notch gave. Cold air rose. A second pipe mouth showed, packed with silt. She scraped it clean. The hum became a tone in her ribs. "Now," she said. Elias leaned on the rope. Mr. Hahn braced. 2 cowboys anchored. The hinge trembled, then held. Clara primed a second hose and fed it to the new mouth. She packed clay with both hands. Her burned palms screamed. She kept going. The windmill caught a longer breath. The barrel swelled, riders nudged forward. Crane raised his hand. "Enough," he called. "Stand down or answer for damage." "We answer with witness," Clara said. She tipped both barrels into the west trench. For a beat, the crust drank and went pale as bone. Then the ground shivered. A low sigh moved under their boots. 10 yards, 20. The wet ribbon jumped to a sheet. It began to run, not creep. Ruth rang the bell hard. The person wrote the minute. Bliss spurred and reached for the hinge. Elias met him with the rope. Lyle drew, but the deputy spoke sharply and metal went back to leather. The judge's voice stayed plain. Anyone who cuts now meets the cell. Crane stared at the bright run as if it had betrayed him. He looked from the ledger in Clara's belt to Ruth to Elias's hands and knew the quiet work had outrun his noise. He turned his horse. This is not finished. It has started, Clara said. They stood while the trench ran. It filled to the first marker Elias had set years ago. It turned the corner and licked the roots of a thirsty willow. Far down, boys shouted. Mr. Hahn's small gauge caught one thin line, then two. The judge signed an order on the person's back. Public easement affirmed during drought, he read. Headworks under joint watch. School recognized. Custody retained. He nodded at Ruth. Miss Ruth Carter, keep ringing. She did. Elias set his brand iron in coals by the post. When it glowed, he pressed it to a pledge board cut from old plank. Smoke wrote his promise in the grain. He handed the board to the judge. Hold me to it. I will, the judge said, and I will hold them to theirs. By late day, the riders were gone. The run was wide enough for a child's foot. Bees hovered. They walked home slowly. Ruth ran ahead and touched each red flag. Clara stood with Elias by the porch. The house looked the same. It felt different. We made a contract, Elias said. We kept it. We also made a life, she said. If you want it. Elias looked at her like a man ready to ride true. I want it. Not only for paper. He held out his hand. She set her hand in it. That was the vow. Clara wiped the ledger and set it on a shelf beside the school register. Ruth put a rose in a jar. Night came cool. The trench talked to the stars. The bell rope hung quietly. The valley breathed like a thing at rest. Clara slept without the ledger under her pillow. She did not need it there now. She had the map in her bones. In the morning the bell would ring, children would come, and the ribbon would keep running. The marriage they named would go on, steady and chosen. The spring would remember its path, and so would they. If this story moved you, tap like. It tells YouTube to share it with more listeners. Tell me in the comments which moment hit you hardest. The bell at dawn, the ledger's secret, or the Headgate standoff. Subscribe for more clean Western romances. And turn on the bell so you never miss the next premiere. Share this with a friend who loves slow burn love and small town courage. Thanks for listening. See you in the next story.